probably the biggest thing to touch on, which is I think what you see just right over my shoulder here, in fact it is the news around the Red Sea. So hey, happy holidays, everybody. It is the last weekly webinar before Christmas and one of the last here during the holiday season. So hopefully everybody is enjoying and maybe a little ahead of their Christmas shopping, or at least more ahead than me. This week will be a little shorter. I think we are probably going to skip the question of the week here for the next 2 weeks and then pick it back up as we get into January. So today will be a little bit shorter, but we do want to make sure to kind of touch on some GDP revision updates, as well as all this drama around the Red Sea news. So we'll come back to that here in a little bit. Before we get into the key components here this week, we did have housing starts, a lot of housing data over the last week or so. Housing starts were up very big, actually. So this was quite the interesting kind of data point to see there, especially during a period where, not so much here in the Pacific Northwest, but across the country, housing has been really slow, and especially with higher rates, as you can imagine, has led to some challenges. But housing starts, again, were up really big here from the most recent data point. We also saw consumer confidence come out much higher than expected. I believe it was the highest in quite a few months. I forget the exact number, so I don't want to pinpoint that, but in quite a few months. And I believe that maybe this is likely a result of signs of inflation coming down. Again, this number basically just measures, as you might imagine, the confidence of the consumer. And certainly if inflation rates are starting to show signs of continuing to come down, I imagine that may have a huge impact on how the consumer is feeling moving forward. So although some of the same broader challenges may still apply, consumer obviously has continued to spend and feels very good, and is maybe even feeling even better heading into the holiday season. We also had initial jobless claims come out today on Thursday. That number was 205,000, not a whole lot to think through here. But we did have the GDP revision. I believe it was the third estimate come out today. And the GDP revision actually came down. So it was 5.3, I believe it was prior. And it came down to 4.9%. So quite the big shift there as we look at GDP revision. And probably the biggest thing to touch on, which is I think what you see just right over my shoulder here, in fact it is the news around the Red Sea. So this was not by design, but this works out great. So there's been a lot of drama over the Red Sea. Many of you have probably heard of this, but what I want to share is maybe more so the potential impacts of it. So basically there's been attacks on ships on ships that deliver goods. And basically, the group that has been kind of coordinating these attacks most recently has shared kind of no signs of slowing, even with U.S. naval forces now in place. So this certainly has caught the headlines of the news clearly. It's something definitely worth watching. And what I would share as far as impacts here, it's maybe a carryover to some of the impacts that we had talked about prior with the Israel-Hamas situation and what's going on there if it were to expand. This is a similar impact takeaway, I think, which is that if this continues, basically it could have some impacts on oil prices more specifically, and potentially cost of goods as well. Obviously the bigger question is how widespread does this get? Does it start to impact supply chains? That might be, that could be the case, but there might be a lot that would need to continue in order to actually see those impacts kind of carry through more broadly. But at least in the shorter run, certainly the impact to commodity prices and oil prices are something to keep an eye on. So that would be the biggest thing to watch for now. Obviously, we'll see how the news kind of continues to unfold moving forward. But nonetheless, certainly wanted to make sure to cover that because that is clearly the topic of the week here in the news. So thanks as always for tuning in. Again, I wanted to keep it shorter, especially going into the holidays. So happy holidays, Merry Christmas, everybody. I hope you're able to enjoy the weekend celebrating coming up. And we will be sure to be here next Thursday, where we actually have tomorrow, we actually have inflation data coming out. So the year's not over, let's put it that way. So we have PCE inflation data coming out tomorrow, along with income and spending. And all of that is right before the stock market closure on Monday for the holidays, and heading into what is typically a slower week. That said, these data points are obviously really important for what the market is watching. So again, we'll be sure to kind of catch you up next Thursday on what has happened during this typically slower kind of period of market volume. So have a great holidays. We will see you next Thursday at 3.